Getting ready. 2 weeks to go. We started a little bit of history, just a little bit. We'll do some more soon. But, we've had many attacks against the Jewish people. You could say that Purim, it was an attack against our bodies. They wanted to kill every man, woman, and child. The festival of Hanukkah celebrates our victory over a religious persecution. There's a word for that in Hebrew. I'll put it on the board here. Shmad. Somebody who is a heretic, somebody who goes against the faith, is called a mishumad, a mishumad. Somebody who is a denier, scoffer. Mishumad. So shmad is an attempt at religious persecution. In other words, they said you can live. I know. It's just there's a way to turn it off. There's an on-off button. In the open the door there, the little window, and there's reset. There we go. So you can remain alive, just bow down to the Greek idols, become subsumed into the Greek culture, and this is unique in our celebrations. It could be that today we have people attacking us for religious reasons, but that's their religion. They want to kill us. Yeah, I turned it on. Yeah, they want to kill us. It's not an attempt to convert us. And whenever there is an attack against Jewish people, like missionaries, that's what the miracle of Hanukkah, it conjures up those images. Right? What did we learn yesterday? That Matityahu ben Yochanan, on page 224, if you want to open up with me. Matityahu ben Yochanan, the high priest, was being forced to worship idols, and he killed the Greek officer. And this was the beginning of the rebellion. We're not going to give in to quash our Judaism in any way. In any case, there are many threats against the Jewish people. The threat of anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head all around the world, and of course the threat physically against Jews wherever they may be. But one of the biggest threats that we've had in our history is the threat against our culture. It's you could call it the silent killer, right? What do they call it in America now? The silent killer in the Western world? Heart disease. Kills. It's the biggest cause of death in the world, if I'm not mistaken. But it's silent. Nobody knows about it because we just eat the junk and whatever fills our arteries and clogs them, or whatever. It's called the silent killer. So the Jewish people have had a silent killer for thousands of years. And that is not the physical threat, but the threat of assimilation, the threat of intermarriage, in just the biggest diaspora that we have today is the Jewish people in America. And we should be on the battlefront with tanks and the enemy that's destroying our people. The problem is there's no tanks, and there's no warplanes, and then there's no missiles. The danger is assimilation. They're just so nice. It's the sweet and silent killer of the Jewish people losing any contact and identity as Jews and being swept away into the surrounding culture. Of course, it gets worse when there's attempted, forced missionaries the against the Jewish religion. That's more overt, and as we read yesterday, perhaps it's a gift from God that they pushed our backs to the wall so that we would fight back. So if we wouldn't, sometimes if our backs are not pushed to the wall, we succumb to the sweetness of just being absorbed into the culture around us. So we have to beware, and it's a war going on constantly. There's the physical persecution, there's the singling out of Jews for just evil and hatred, but then there's also the attack against our faith, against our culture, and this is what Hanukkah is about. And we're going to continue learning more about Hanukkah now. Page 226 is where we got up to. So this is very relevant. When we talk about Pesach, the President of the United States has a Seder in the White House. We say, it's because it's relevant. It's about freedom. It's freedom, right? We talk about Purim. It's relevant because they're coming to kill us. To see those terrorists with the bombs and the weapons, they want to slaughter us all, man, woman, and child. It's very relevant. Hanukkah is also an even more relevant because we're losing our identity, we're assimilating, and there still is also missionary activity. There are people that are trying to convert us. Unfortunately, just this year we heard of a terrible, terrible, terrible case. So somebody who we taught here, he got snapped up by the missionaries, and he became a believer in Jesus. Horrible, horrible, terrible. It was, I can make all sorts of excuses. It was Corona, it was difficult. There's all sorts of pressures. But the bottom line is, there is a threat. There is a threat. Good morning, Yaakov. There is a threat against us at all times, a religious threat. We have to be strong and be aware that there are attacks against our culture that are not sticks and stones or bombs and guns, and can be even more dangerous sometimes.
You study here?
Sorry?
You studied here?
I don't think we want to get into any details, because I don't want you to start thinking, do I know him? Who is this? Who is that? That's not the point. I'm trying to keep it ambiguous on purpose. And also, but there was, there's all sorts of stuff out there. We have to be vigilant. Not to mention people who, don't keep strong to the practices of Judaism, who falter in their observance of the mitzvot. That's also something to cry about. But leaving the religion totally and marrying out, that's the extreme. That's what was going on in the Hasmonean dynasty, in the Hellenistic society. Right? Chodesh, Shabbat, and Milah, right? Chashmonah. We said the Hasmoneans. Maybe it's an acronym for the three religious observances. And there's a midrash that talks about that the Hellenists, the Jews who wanted to become Greek, they actually sort of tried to pull the foreskin. They were circumcised as babies. They were good Jewish babies, but they wanted to have a foreskin again. So they somehow managed to pull the foreskin longer so that they would look like a non-Jew. This is extreme. But we don't have to look too far to see people who want to assimilate and look like non-Jews. What are we wearing? This is all Western clothing. I'm looking around. Everybody here, Western clothing. Some people think they get away from it because they wear Western clothing from 100 years ago. Okay. The black fedora. It's not in style anymore. The point is, to make sure that we don't just get assimilated where there's a danger to wear their clothing of the surrounding culture. So there's no mitzvah to wear black and white and a fur hat like they did in Russia. We're not in Russia anymore. But we do have to wear a kippah. That's the way we present our Jewish identity today. That we have to wear tzitzit. We have to, of course, keep the other mitzvot of the Torah. Make sure that we don't hide our Jewishness. So this is something that we have to. It's a little bit of a fine point that we're going to try to tease out here of the story of Hanukkah. It's not just all about lighting the lights and eating a sufganiyah. Eating a sufganiyah, nothing against it except for the oil and the calories. But there's actually some delicious kinds. It's not just you take 100 bites until you finally reach a little bit of the jelly. Now you got chocolate covered with all sorts of sprinkles and pistachio and all that. Sufganiyot are much better, but that's not what it's about. So the holiday of Hanukkah, as we're getting closer to it, is about living our Jewish identity, not assimilating and being strong in our faith against the challenges, all sorts of challenges to our faith from other religions or from the no religion, which is becoming more and more pervasive in our society. So, Bezrat Hashem, let's go a little further in the book, section 4. Chapter 11, section 4, crises, in plural, in the Hasmonean dynasty. Idan, will you take it away, please?
After the war against the Greeks ended in a military and political victory, the cultural struggle returned to the fore. We still needed to defend ourselves against the torrent of Hellenism that had already engulfed all the surrounding cultures. Greek culture was very powerful. Its methods of scientific research were advanced, its military strategy was excellent, its system of government was efficient, its sculptures and architectural designs were impressive, its dramatic performances captivated, and its sporting events thrilled. This is why Greek culture succeeded in spreading so vigorously throughout the civilized world. Centuries later, when Rome had already become a major military power in the world, Greek culture remained the dominant cultural force. Although the Hasmonean revolt impeded the process of Hellenization, it did not stop it entirely. A few decades later, Hellenism once again struck deep roots among wealthy Jews and among those who were in close contact with the Gentiles. The Hellenists of the Hasmonean era were known as the Sadducees. They did not preach total assimilation, but they believed that it was possible to combine loyalty to the written Torah and Greek culture within a Jewish national framework. One of the great tragedies of Jewish history is that the descendants of Matityahu, who sacrificed his life to fight Hellenism, were themselves drawn to Hellenism and persecuted the sages of Israel, the defenders of our tradition. Matityahu's great-grandson was King Yanai, who also served as high priest. An evil man, Yanai, believed that his death would gladden the sages and their supporters. In order to spoil their joy, he commanded that immediately following his death, a large number of sages should be executed. After he died, however, his heirs, led by his wife, Shlomzion, disobeyed his orders. The sages declared the day of Yanai's death a joyous day of thanksgiving, marking the demise of an evildoer and the salvation of the sages.
Wow. Do you know there's a street in Jerusalem, in the center of town, called Yafo Street? You've heard of it? You've been on it? Yafo Street? You go toward you continue down Yafo Street towards the old city. There's a fork in the road. It's very famous Jerusalem landmark. The fork in the road off of Yafo Street, it's called Shlom Tzion HaMalka Street. Queen Shlom Tzion.
The train or the market? Is it the market and the train line? Is it like
The train line continues on Yafo, and Shlom Tzion goes off of it a little bit. It's past Kikar Tzion. Just past Kikar Tzion further, I think it's called Kikar Tzahal, maybe? It's where Misrata Pnim is, for those of you who have to renew your visas or anything like that. That's where the Interior Ministry is. But, It's across the street from the Iriya, exactly. Yeah, right where the Iriya is on the Yafo, and Shlom Tzion is the break off. Anyway, Shlom Tzion is named after this queen of Israel. She was the wife of King Yana. Yana was a horrible guy, and Shlom Tzion, his wife, kept it together.
He's only had, what, 3 queens in Jewish history?
Oh no, there were many other queens.
Deborah,
She was a prophetess.
queen, a ruler, or...
She was a ruler, right? Ruler or a prophetess. No, there were others. There's a few famous ones, though. Primarily in the ancient world, the kings were in charge, but there were a few queens. She is well known for helping the sages survive, well, whoever, as much as she could. Her brother, she was the sister of Shimon ben Shetach, one of the greatest sages of the age. And she, there's discussions between King Yana and Shimon ben Shetach, who he tried to kill the others. There's various traditions. Here he goes by that, he didn't kill too many, but he actually did kill, the Talmud says he killed some of the sages, but he didn't kill Shimon ben Shetach because it was his brother-in-law. He was his brother-in-law, and he had many discussions with King Yanai, the cruel. It's shocking though. He says that he was a great grandson of the hero of Hanukkah, Matityahu, who fought against the Hellenists. So it's an ongoing battle. The fact that we were able to purify the temple is amazing. And we're going to talk about what essentially we're celebrating when we light the Hanukkah candles. But it's an ongoing battle against assimilation, essentially, assimilating into the Greek culture and the elements of faith which they're trying to beat out of us, maybe in the sweetest way. Okay, we go on in history. So we're learning a little bit about the Hasmonean period. We said that the revolt started a little bit after King Antiochus' decree in minus 165. You can see more of the history in the footnotes. It gets into more dates and names and the various Greek generals. But we're going to try to. This is not a class necessarily in history. We're trying to understand what we're celebrating. Okay, go ahead. There was more to come that will help you place yourself in the period of history that we're talking about. Continue, Idan, on the bottom of page 227, please. Eventually,
the slaves of the Hasmoneans, foremost among them Herod, overcame their masters, annihilated the entire Hasmonean line, and ruled in their stead. The sages thus declared, anyone who claims to be from the Hasmonean dynasty is either a slave or a liar.
Well, so they were destroyed. The Hasmoneans, the great heroes of Hanukkah, were killed out by their own people. There was fighting. This is what they always say, that the baseless hatred is what made the second temple destroyed. There was fighting between the Jews. It was basically a civil war. It's a strange thing to have a holiday to celebrate a civil war. So we don't actually celebrate the war, but in the aftermath of Hanukkah there was. A few years later, 50, 100 years later, the Jewish community crumbled and imploded with the fighting, and they became Jews, but they were sort of half Jews.
They were conquered and forced to convert.
Forced conversion, right? And but they were part of the Jewish community. But they were very happy to get rid of the Hasmoneans. And we know Herod, of course, was famous for rebuilding the second temple and for building the mountain next to my house called Herodian, where he built his grave. He was quite a tyrant, but he was an amazing builder. Famously, he built up the Marat HaMachpelah we just celebrated, right? The building that's on top of the caves until today, standing for 2,000 years. Quite a builder. Buildings in Gaza, they don't last more than 5 years. His survived thousands of years. Anyways, there was, continue, Idan.
Based on this, we can understand the criticism that certain sages leveled against the Hasmoneans, accusing them of failing to appoint a king from the tribe of Judah. As the Torah prescribes, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Bereshit.
The Hasmoneans, what the tribe were they from? Right, what we said, Matityahu was the son of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. So what tribe were they from? Levi. They're Levites. They're supposed to be priests, that's fine, but not kings. Kings are supposed to come from the tribe of Yehuda. In any case, the sages found a violation here. But really, what were they criticizing? The Hasmonean family ultimately didn't succeed to keep the faith, within, and to keep the Jewish people faithful to our traditions. Go ahead. At first,
Hasmonean leaders were called Nesiim, chieftains, but they eventually crowned themselves as kings. They also reserved the position of high priest for themselves. Early, their involvement in matters of state interfered with their priestly duties, blemishing the holy service which was supposed to be performed in sanctity and purity, and strengthening the influence of Hellenism. From a political standpoint as well, their kingdom was lacking, as it existed in the shadow of the mighty empires and, more often than not, under their
Aegis.
influence.
influence. This political weakness also strengthened Hellenism's influence over Judea.
All right, so I don't understand why we're celebrating. That's what we're going to have to see in the next paragraph. Why we're celebrating if these Hasmoneans, these Maccabees, right? Hasmoneans, Maccabees, they were such great warriors and they rebelled against the Hellenists, but in the end, they themselves were quite connected to the culture. They messed up with the Jewish tradition. They became high priests and kings, and they're not supposed to. And they weren't, their grandchildren even killed the sages. What then is there left to celebrate? So this is really key for us to understand. This history, of course, first of all, what we said up till now is that they had backbone. The very fact that we rebelled against the Hellenists, right? They had our back against the wall, worshipped idols, that they weren't willing to do. The similarities to nowadays are shocking. Although even though we have a secular Medinat Israel and secular people leading it, Ben Gurion was not a great keeper of Shabbat or the faith, as far as I know. But he was a tremendous power as a national leader, to defend our national rights and to keep our identity as Jews. He was into Tanakh. There were certain elements of Jewish pride which are to be celebrated. Ultimately, we need to develop that. We know that secular Zionism is on it's having its troubles. Let's just put it that way, and we have to have our tradition and our faith to be the source of our identity. Without any strong reason to be Jewish, we're just going to assimilate into the Western world. And so there's a lot of similarities between the story of Hanukkah and our modern age, and how we are trying to make a mix between Western culture and our Jewish values. And it's a very tricky business. Some people, they lose any commitment to their identity and to their Jewish practice, slowly but surely. And so we can identify with the Hasmoneans somewhat. We have to be strong and fight against the people trying to oppress us, especially against missionaries, trying to steal away young souls, and politically. We're very happy that they got political independence. Hasmoneans gave us independence. We celebrate that on Hanukkah too, but we have to be aware, and as we're going to learn, I believe that what we're celebrating on Hanukkah is that this turnaround, this period of Jewish history, was actually a period of tremendous growth. We're celebrating what this independence gave us. It maybe in parallel too, we're celebrating the renaissance of Judaism in the Second Temple era, concurrent with those who were trying to assimilate and become Greek. was a rejuvenation of Jewish tradition. Some would say that's really the foundation of what we call today Judaism, rabbinic Judaism. The rabbis, this was towards the end of the Second Temple period. We find more and more the teaching of the rabbis getting written down and becoming the center of focus of our religion. And that's the religion that we practice until today, 2,000 years over. So now we're going to read about the accomplishments that were, despite this fight against assimilation and the fight against the religious persecution, the success that we had basically is all the books that we're learning now and everything the Judaism that we practice today is the result of the pushback against that fight during the time of Hanukkah. We'll see more details in a minute. Yes, thank you for waiting. Yaakov. Yeah. It's a fire alarm, and some people wanted to make toast. And the alarm is a little sensitive. It happens every once in a while.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. It can be disturbing.
Is
Yeah.
Is it fine if you say Lashon Hara about our enemies?
About who?
Our enemies.
No, it's a good thing. We're supposed to fight our enemies and kill them.
So it's fine.
Yeah, Lashon Hara against them is a wonderful thing.
It's just like I had an idea so that if you want to win your enemy, you're supposed to treat them as equals. Otherwise, you think that they're weak, but in fact they're not really weak. So you're supposed to understand what they really are.
It's like assimilate them. That's what Joshua did when he came in. He made them work in the field. He gave them rights.
That was an exception, actually. That was an exception, and he really got hoodwinked.
Joshua's strategy was not bad.
His strategy was to beat down the armies primarily. There was one episode with a special group who came and
Gave them a little privilege.
they came and they pretended that they were not from the area. They were Givenites, but they pretended they had come from far. They put on tattered clothing as if they came to, give homage to the new king of the area. And so he thought, okay, they're not from here. They want to be under my rule, so we'll accept and we'll make a treaty with them. Turned out they were tricking. They were locals who put on an act. In any case, it's hard to go directly from the story of Joshua and how he conquered the land, because he had a divine command to destroy all the 7 nations, which we don't have today. The 7 nations don't exist anymore. Of course, we have to conquer the land, but that's a very, very different. But in general, the approach to enemies, if they're trying to kill you, kill them first. Calling them bad names is allowed. If you're allowed to kill them. And saying Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, again, in general, I always say, the mitzvot are given for the relationship between Jews and Jews. It's a system for rule in our bubble. Whenever there's a question about how to treat people outside that bubble, we have a different system, we have a different set of rules, we have a different set of attitude. It's complicated. So you don't try to take the word Lashon Hara and say, oh, it's a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a very important prohibition. That's between Jews and Jews. Okay, between Jews and non-Jews, it's more complicated. We discuss it much less. So we're trying to learn here our Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition focuses on building our own nation as carefully and as precisely as possible, so we can be the nuclear power plant, the spiritual nuclear power plant of the entire world. So we got to get our own act together before we go out and focus on exactly how to missionize the others. We're not a big missionary religion, but okay. Other questions? Somebody wanted to speak. Somebody wanted to say something. Shmuel, you wanted to say something about the Hellenists or the assimilation. I don't know. Missionaries. Oi.
I heard a new one that now they're claiming that their Messiah is the line of Judah. So, to go with the times, the change of the wind, the new fashion.
Well, they basically said genealogy is not important anymore. They don't have to have any clue. You said you don't have to be Jewish at all. You don't have to be. It's just about faith. So they lost any claim to lineage when they said it's just all about faith. It could be for all the peoples of the world. Everybody has to just believe. In any case, that's.
So my other other question was the Hasmoneans. Were they like half Greek, half Jewish? Were they just like not even fully Jewish? Were they just
So the
part of
Hasmonean were
Greek Empire?
Jews.
Were they just
Hasmonean were Jews who rebelled against Hellenism. They
100%.
100%. Yeah. They were rebelling against the Greek culture and the Greek oppression, the religious oppression.
the empire?
Shmad, right? It was the empire, sure. Alexander the Great conquered the whole world. So Greece, the Greeks were in charge of the land of Israel too, where the Judeans were. They were Judeans, lived in Judah, Jews, and many of the Jews were succumbing to the enticements of the culture, and some of them were even worshipping idols, the Greek idols. And the Hasmoneans were a group of Jews from Judea, led by the priestly family of Yochanan, the high priest. His children, Matityahu, had 5 sons. Does anybody know the names of the 5 sons of Matityahu? Yehuda the Maccabee is number 1. We know him. Then he had a brother called Yonatan. Good. Another brother called Shimon. Another brother called Elazar. There's a town in Israel near where Elazar fell. He was crushed by an elephant. You know, there were elephants brought to this land by the Greeks. That was their war machine. That was the tank of old. And the 5th brother was, I think, Yochanan. I'm not mistaken. Huh? What did you say? I can't hear you. Sorry. Matityahu was the father. Matityahu was the father. And then Yochanan, Yonatan, Shimon, Elazar, and Yehuda. Anyways, you can see more of these names and like the names of the Greek rulers and the history of the rest of the Hasmonean dynasty till it was stamped out by their fellow brethren.
They're still out on the Edomites.
Edomites do still exist?
No, the jury's still out if they were Jewish or not Jewish. I mean, it's like more, Arab than the Jewish community.
Right. The Talmud discusses it. I mean, there's no ramification now, but they're known as Edomite converts. That's what they had, a special status. Halachically, the sages, of course, had to deal with it. Are they Jewish? Could Jews marry them? Could they touch the wine? All sorts of things like that. As rabbinic Judaism was getting so for sure the rabbis discussed it at length what the status of, but they identified as Jews once they came and they converted. But they, as we know, Herod, one of them, he curried favor with the Romans after the Romans had conquered the entire world, and he helped them come into Israel. He was a representative of them. But this is part of the end of the Hasmonean dynasty. There was still some semblance of independence under Herod and other Roman appointments until ultimately the Roman army came, because there was the Great Revolt. The Great Revolt, which is when the Jews in Judea were feeling too much that their independence was taken away, even the amount of independence that they had, and there's some sort of a Jew, like Herod was a semi-Jew appointed by the Roman. This was even that it got worse than that, and the Romans were just oppressing the Jewish people, and they wanted their independence. The Great Revolt, year 67, ultimately led to the Roman army coming over, not just a few soldiers here and there and a few appointments, and ultimately they destroyed the Second Temple in year 70. So we go from minus 165, the Great Hasmonean Revolt, until year 70, when the temple was destroyed. So how long did we have some semblance of independence? Just over 200 years. From minus 165 to year 0, that's 165 years, and then from 0 to 70, so it's 235 years. Although it was not pure Jewish reign, but once the temple was destroyed, that was the end of any type of Jewish independence. Yeah.
I had a question because I was reading some other books where, like, under Greek rule, they started to desecrate the temple. So they started slaughtering pigs.
Before 165, yeah, exactly. That's why we had the rebellion.
They put like a statue of Jupiter.
That's right.
So
that's right.
These were the like 160 BC.
Minus 170. We said in the previous footnote, it talks about when the Greek rulers, instead of being the Egyptian Greeks, it got turned over to the Seleucid Greeks. Remember we talked about that yesterday? That they were not as benevolent in allowing the Jews to keep their own services and their own religious practices. The Seleucid Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, they wanted us to stop keeping any religious practices, and they wanted us to stop keeping Shabbat and Brit Milah, and they put up these idols in the temple. They tried to turn our temple in Jerusalem as a place of worship for the Greek gods, and that's what brought on the religious rebellion that we celebrate on Hanukkah. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay, that clarifies. I mean, that's if you really are interested in the history, read the footnotes here. I mean, there's other books as well, but let's talk more about what we celebrate, because up till now it sounds like Asmonean rule, although they did, hooray for Matityahu and his sons, who said we're not going to worship idols. They themselves were quite assimilated, and their children became their grandchildren. Were fighting against the sages. So what is there to celebrate on Hanukkah? Let's read section 5. Okay, Yaakov, would you read for us, please? It's good that you came early today. Wonderful. Soon we'll pull out your cello too. Is that the same?
Despite all their shortcomings, the victories that the Hasmoneans achieved had great value. The political independence that they won, though limited, contributed to the prosperity of the Jewish population in Eretz Israel in every way. Previously, around 40% of Judea produce was taken by the Greeks as a tax. Wow, 40% tax. Now all the remaining in Eretz Israel, stimulating economic growth by virtue of the victories, Jewish settlements sprung up throughout the country. Jews immigrated from the diaspora, birth rates rose, and the Jewish nation, which had undergone destruction and exile, rehabilitated itself to a large degree. Through the protection afforded by political independence, Eretz Israel became once again the national and spiritual center of Jewish people. Houses of study grew and flourished, fully expressing the injunction of the man of the great assembly: produce many disciples and make a fence for the Torah. The spiritual foundations of the oral Torah, which enabled Jewry to safeguard its faith and its Torah for 2,000 years of harsh exile, were laid in those days. For this reason, the miracle of the oil expresses Hanukkah more than any other symbol. Although the second temple was destroyed, all the political achievements of the Hasmoneans were lost. The study of the oral Torah, which developed and crystallized during that period, endured forever. The miracle of the oil manifested the eternal dimension of Torah, its ability to eliminate the darkness supernaturally. By virtue of the Torah, we managed to survive the long, dark exile. The miracle of the oil showed that the Jewish people are unique, different from all other nations, and that it's impossible to subdue or extinguish our fight. It wasn't the merit of the self-sacrifice of Matityahu and his sons that the deep foundations of the Torah and the uniqueness of the Jewish people were revealed, but the Hashmonean dynasty, with all its problems and complexities, was short-lived, and we do not commemorate it in a particular, it's so great reminder.
Right. So thank you. This history is really not what we talk about much on Hanukkah. It's not a history. Our traditions, our holidays. This is not even religious history. What we celebrate, all of our holidays, are about the meaning right now, here and now. And what we celebrate on Hanukkah is the spiritual achievements which were made possible by this rebellion. We said, stopping the assimilation, not giving in to being destroyed, the religious attempt to wipe out the Jewish faith. But even more importantly is what developed because of that rebellion, and that is the Torah that we have today. He mentioned the idea of the oral Torah. Don't think that the oral Torah started then, but really it burgeoned and blossomed and got developed and got written down, and that's what we study until today. The oral Torah, this was the birthplace. This Hasmonean era, with all of its political problems and its even religious problems, the leadership was not so holy. Even the priests were not so holy. But the sages developed the Torah, and the Torah is the Torah that we keep and study until today. So if you think, when is the holiday of receiving the Torah? Simchat Torah, you say Shavuot, all good answers. Really, if you ask me, Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the holiday of receiving the Torah. Receiving, you could separate it. You could say, okay, on Shavuot, obviously we stood at Sinai, we received the written Torah, but on Hanukkah we received the oral Torah. Neither are true. Because Shavuot we didn't receive any written Torah. That was the time of the declaration of the Ten Commandments. The 10 tablets came, the 2 tablets with the 10 Commandments, that came 40 days later, okay, even 120 days later, on Yom Kippur, when we received the tablets. If you remember, we talked about it around Yom Kippur. But the written Torah, that was years later. So that's not really true either. But you could say Shavuot is the day we celebrate receiving the Torah. Okay, Simchat Torah is because we read that Chumash once a year. We finish it on Simchat Torah. That's a great celebration. But the core of what makes the Torah alive and dynamic and applicable to our lives today is primarily the oral Torah. The oral Torah which started together with Moshe at Har Sinai. It says in the Torah, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe. That's oral. So the Torah actually is the foundation is the oral Torah. It started way back then. But when did it really become galvanized and turned into a body of traditions that could be, that was regimented, that was well-defined and sustainable for thousands of years? It was during this period. The end of the Hasmonean, after the Hasmonean revolt, the sages had freedom. They had to be saved from King Yanai, but their descendants, and for the years after, even after, during and after the destruction of the Second Temple, while all this political upheaval was happening, the rabbis were galvanizing the oral Torah. And that's really what the light symbolizes. The central performance on Hanukkah is lighting the candles. Light candles, you have to understand, in the olden days, what was a candle? It looked like this. It was a bowl full of oil.
What's the wick made of?
And then there was a wick. The wick was made from many different things. Wool, cotton, whatever they could find. Whatever would work. So you had a bowl. So a candle in ancient times actually meant a bowl which could be empty or it could be filled with oil. The oil, the miracle of there being more oil means content. It's not a celebration of the vessels. That we need the vessels. We can celebrate the vessels on Yom Ha'atzmaut. We need the political framework. But the Torah is what has been alive for the Jewish people. Without vessels, the temple was destroyed. The Hasmonean dynasty was destroyed very quickly, in short order. But what survived, what helped the Jewish people survive, is the oil, the content, the spiritual tradition and values, full of mitzvot and elements of faith, emunot. That's really what got developed by the sages. And really, this is a holiday by the sages, about the sages, and what they produced. What we call today, some people call it Rabbinic Judaism. They try to make a distinction between Rabbinic Judaism and Biblical Judaism. And there are distinctions, but it's not one against the other. It's a development of the, in previous times, there was no, this body of literature was not, this oral body of literature was not written down and not developed as much as it was towards the end of the Second Temple. But we'll see more about that, Bezrat Hashem, soon. In any case, I point out to you, bottom of page 229, go back one page. If they were your books, you could mark them. This sentence, 5 lines from the end of the page, the spiritual foundations of the oral Torah, which enabled Judaism to safeguard its faith and its Torah for 2,000 years of harsh exile, were laid in those days. That's what we're celebrating. The spiritual foundations of the oral Torah on Hanukkah. Together with the victory and the might of the Maccabees. It's nothing to sneeze at. There were battles, there were wars. These heroes gave up their lives for the political independence, for fighting back the Greek Empire. Unbelievable battles. Of course, that's nothing to sneeze at. But that never was. In recent years, in recent history, about 100 years ago, the early secular Zionists tried to adapt and maybe co-opt Hanukkah as a holiday of political independence and the focus on that. That's why until today all the sports teams in Israel are part of a group called Maccabi Tel Aviv or Maccabi Haifa. The Maccabees filled with might. They stood up against the Greek oppression. It's true. But that never was the focus of the celebration of Hanukkah for thousands of years. Hanukkah, it was enabled by this tremendous military might, and we can't ignore that. We have to appreciate that for sure. But primarily it's about lighting the candles, the oil. The oil represents the culture of our Torah versus the culture of the Hellenists, the assimilationists. And even those great heroes, those military mighty Maccabees, unfortunately they themselves, their descendants, they didn't have the spiritual power to remain true to the faith. It had to be taken over by the sages. And the Kohanim, and somewhat the sages, even the Kohanim were filled with Hellenists at some point. But what we're celebrating is the Torah that came out as a result of this era in history, not specifically the Hanukkah events. Okay? Questions, comments? Yes, please.
It's kind of ironic that we're celebrating the oil and like you say here, the spiritual foundations of
Yes.
the Torah, the birth maybe of what we call today Rabbinic Judaism. But these people were rebelling against the Hasmoneans that won the political victory. It's like this. We celebrate on one hand the Hasmoneans and their victory, their independence, but on the other hand, in the religious aspect,
It was in some ways a civil war. Yes, in some ways it was within the Jewish people. There was a struggle. We could call it between the religious and the secular, if you want to make it really relevant to today. And we celebrate the religious victory that we kept true to our faith, and we developed these traditions into a spiritual practice, which should to be put into
the
practice.
Hasmoneans became the high priests.
Some of them, not all of them. It's obviously as broad brushstrokes.
The high priests were Hasmoneans, like all of them.
That's right, but the sages didn't agree. The sages were against the high priest many times because they were not.
Those Hasmoneans became the Sadducees.
Correct. Some of them did. Yeah, there were groups which did not accept what we call today rabbinic Judaism. Right? Rabbinic Judaism is history is written by the victors, right? The Jewish people, the Jewish tradition that survives is the tradition of, we call them they're called in those days the Prushim, the separatists versus the Pharisees, they were called. Yeah, but the word lifrosh means to be separate. They're separating from the Sadducees and the Hellenists, and they said we have to not dilute our tradition and only accept the written law. The Sadducees were all into, all we need is the written Torah, and all this oral stuff being passed down, we can jettison that, and we don't accept that. The power of the rabbis was a battle. It was a battle. Baruch Hashem, what we celebrate today is the development of Judaism as we know it. It was Judaism developed together, the oral Torah together with the written Torah, not one against the other. Yeah.
I always read it as Pirushim, like Lefaresh. They
Mm.
were interpreting they're using the oral Torah to interpret the written Torah.
Possible, but I don't think so. Perush is one thing, and Perushim is not. They're not interpreting themselves. Lifrosh is to separate. The faresh is to interpret. So the same letter roots, depends on which binyan you're using. But no, I never understood Prushim as people who interpret the Torah necessarily. But I don't know. That's a good point. Interesting. Okay, so far so good. Let's do a little more, and then we have to pray for our soldiers and our hostages. We're going to learn more about the oral Torah. Really, this is so foundational, and that's why Hanukkah, in many ways, is the holiday. Out of all the holidays, we still have yeshiva. We have classes on Hanukkah. With a few days break. We'll see. We'll see the schedule when it gets closer to Hanukkah. But we don't have classes on Pesach. We don't have classes on Sukkot. We don't have classes on Purim. But on Hanukkah, we do have classes because that's the way we celebrate. It's all about Torah, keeping the Torah. Let's continue. Idan, you were reading? Okay. This explains this statement. Yeah. We're in page 230, right? In the middle. This explains?
This explains the sage's statement that the holiday of Hanukkah endures because of the miracle of the oil and the rabbinic mitzvah of lighting the candles. The miracle of the oil showed that the military victory over the Greeks did not benefit that generation alone, but all generations. Therefore, the sages determined that we should continue observing Hanukkah even though the other holidays mentioned in Megillat Tanit were abolished after the temple was destroyed. Thus, in addition to the mitzvah of lighting candles all 8 nights of Hanukkah, we recite Al Hanisim and Hallel to thank and praise Hashem for saving us and allowing us to defeat our enemies. Over the years, it became clear that the miracle was even greater than we originally thought. Not only did we manage to survive the torrent of Hellenism that inundated the world, but Judaism shattered through a long, complicated process most of the pagan foundations of Hellenism. The abstract belief in one God, ethical values, and the aspiration to fix the world, all fundamental principles of the Torah, increasingly spread among the nations of the world, eventually becoming, through means both direct and indirect, i.e. by Christianity and Islam, the foundations of all the good and beneficial aspects of human culture. The longer our exile lasted, the longer and brighter the light of Israel and its Torah shone, which will continue to illuminate the world until we merit bringing new and pure oil from the olives of Eretz Israel in which we will light the menorah of our holy temple, and the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem speedily in our time.
Amen. Yafeh. Okay. We'll stop here. Open up your Sidurim, please. If everybody could grab a blue Sidur, and we'll sing a little bit. I also want to introduce something to you in preparation for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're meeting at 9 o'clock, but we're also meeting at 7 a.m. I hope you're all, great, please. Yeah, we're all going to pray together tomorrow. 7 a.m. in the English library.
7 a.m.
7 a.m. You know there's such a time in the day? Are you ever up then? Their buses are running. You can get here even if you don't live inside the Machon.
Is there a prayer here?
There is. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. a special prayer service for you. Designed for you. It's called the Learner's Minyan, where we're going to walk you through the different parts of the service. A little bit slower than the average prayer service. It'll last till 8 approximately. 7 till 8. And then there's a little break. You got breakfast. At 9 a.m. we have our regular class. But tomorrow is a special event. Okay? So make sure you if possible, if at all possible, join us at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Bring your talit, your tefillin if you have them. Bring your sidur if you have one. If not, we can use these sidurim. These are wonderful. And we can all be on the same page that way. Maybe, Yosef, you'll remember to bring these into the other room tomorrow morning, so we'll have them. Great. While we're getting ready for, I think Idan is going to bring his violin too. So, he's here already. Oh, while you guys tune up, I want to teach you another song that maybe we'll sing tomorrow morning, with your permission. Maybe you can pick it up on the fly. We're going to go to page 151. Go to page 151 with me. 151. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Line 8. Page 151, line 8. You have it?
Avinu?
Avinu. Starts with the word Avinu. Avinu avarachama Hamerachem rachem aleinu v'ten b'libeinu bina lehavinu lehaskil. The English is, our Father, compassionate Father, ever compassionate, have compassion on us. A lot of rachamim, rachamim, rachamim. Compassion, compassion. Begging God for compassion. What are we asking for? What is He going to have compassion with us? And give us, Tein b'libeinu. The way I sing it is there's an extra word, bina. Instill in our hearts understanding. Lehavinu lehaskil. The desire to understand and discern, to listen, learn, and teach, to observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah in love. So we're asking Hashem to help us be good Jews, to learn the Torah, to practice the Torah, to study it, to keep it. It can be a challenge sometimes. There's Hellenists out there trying to stop us from observing our Jewish tradition. So we need help. Sometimes we need help. It can be so hard. So we ask Hashem for His help. Have compassion on us. And instill in us the wisdom to study and observe all the words of your holy Torah. Avinu avarachama hamerachem rachem aleinu v'ten b'libeinu bina lehavinu lehaskir lishmoa lilmod lelamed לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. Again repeat. לשמוע ללמוד וללמד לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. Okay, that's a beautiful tune. It's a little bit quick to pick it up. I see Yaakov's already picking it up. We'll come back to it in a minute. There's a continuation. While we're here, I don't want to. Let's continue. The next part, you might know it's a more jumpy tune. The next line, it's 5 lines from the bottom of the page on 151, and enlighten our eyes in our Torah. We're asking a continuation of this. Where Hashem, you love us and you gave us the Torah, but enlighten our eyes in your Torah. Let our hearts cling to your commandments. Unite our hearts to love and revere your name. What a beautiful prayer. That's what we're trying to do here in Yeshiva, right? We're trying to study Torah, trying to observe its commandments, and enlighten our eyes in your Torah. Let our hearts cling to your commandments. The song goes like this. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. That's the low part. Now, of course, like every Jewish song, there's a low part and a high part. ולמען לא נבוש. There's a few words in the different a different tradition. It has 2 words. ולא נבוש ולא נקלל. You know it. ולא ניקשר לעולם ועד. Again. ולא נבוש ולא נקלל ולא ניקשר לעולם ועד. So I taught you 2 songs, one for Avinu and one for V'ha'er Einenu. Okay, let's repeat the second one first, and then we'll go back and repeat the previous one, and then we'll do our daily prayer. Okay, so V'ha'er Einenu, 5 lines from the end. Everybody got it? Page 151, 5 lines from the end. Enlighten our eyes. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. ולא נבוש ולא נקלל ולא ניקשר לעולם ועד ולא נבוש ולא נגלה, ולא נקשר לעולם ועד. Wow, beautiful, wonderful. You guys are picking it up so quickly. Thank you. Let's go back now to line 8. Avinu Avarachaman. Heartfelt prayer. Our Father, have compassion on us and help us learn, understand, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah in love. Avinu Avarachaman. המרחם, רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו בינה, להבינו להשכיל. Again, אבינו אב הרחמן, המרחם, רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו בינה, להבינו להשכיל. לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמוע ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. Again, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמוע ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחן לבבנו לאהבה וליראת שמך. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחן לבבנו לאהבה וליראת שמך. ולא נבוש ולא נקלל ולא נקשר לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש ולא נקלל ולא נקשר לעולם ועד. Beautiful, thank you, well, amazing, beautiful prayers. That's one of my favorites. It's the bracha before the Shema. Hopefully we'll sing it together tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Okay, turn to page 231, and we'll sing pray to Hashem for our hostages. Ha'achenu kol beit Yisrael, ha'achenu, last line, last 3 lines. Israel, הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין בים האחינו כל בית ישראל, ישראל, הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין בים. Hamakom Yerachem, Yerachem Aleihem Yotzei Mitzrayim Lirvacha U'meyafei Le'olam Mashiach Le'geula Hashtam Bagana U'bizman Kawawalev Amakom Yerachem Yerachem Aleihem Yotzei Mitzrayim Le'yavacha U'meyafei Le'olam U'mishavah Le'geula Hashtam Bagala U'bizman Kawawalev. One more time. Everybody look at me. Look at me and smile. Look at me, look to the camera and smile. Shmuel, I can't see you. Shmuel, I can't see your face. Move in. Israel, move out. Binyamin, look at the camera. Thank you. Okay, terrific. Good job, guys. Good job. Hopefully our prayers will be heard. Thank you. All the singers and all the musicians. Okay, now it's time for a test. A quiz. I'm going to give out some pages, and this is all material that we've covered before, and that's why we're starting with a test or a quiz, but we're going to go over it again. So give these out, one each. Take a pen. Everybody have a pen? There's an extra pen here if somebody doesn't have. Pen or pencil. Your job is to translate and to date the historical period. I was going to show you exactly what the historical periods are in a minute. So for now, just see if you know what these glossary words are. And I'll be right back with some more copies. In the meantime, try to work on this for a few minutes. You might want to stop the recording for a few minutes.